This podcast is made possible by you, the supporters of WPLN and WNXP, Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's March 5th, 2025. On this day in 1743, the first religious periodical in what would become the United States was published in Boston. It was called The Christian History, and it was the project of a New England minister trying to find some kind of common ground between old and new strains of faith that were feeding a kind of tumultuous time for religion. On one side were the austere, buttoned-down establishment churches that had played a role in founding so many American colonies, folks like the Puritans. On the other, the revival movement that historians now call the Great Awakening was a more emotional and less formally organized approach to faith. Now, at the time, most people were still on the rolls of those old-school congregations, but church attendance had dwindled to just about 20 to 30% of members showing up for services because they were going to those revivals instead. The Church History published issues for just 2 years, but it created and collected quite a bit of the paper trail that allows modern historians to understand what was going on at the time and just how Americans' religious communities managed to change so significantly in the mid-18th century. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with some historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Now, only time will tell how history will describe the religious transformation going on right now in the United States. But there's no question that things are changing. The Pew Research Center recently released the findings of their religious landscape study, which is based on a survey that they conduct every so often. It happened in 2007, then in 2014, and then again last year. The new results find that the number of people describing themselves as Christian continues to decline across the U.S., but also here in the Bible Belt. In Tennessee, that number has slid from 85% the first time the survey was held to 72% calling themselves Christian now. The figures for other religions like Judaism and Islam have held steady, with 2 to 3% of Tennesseans saying they hold to those faiths. Now, 72% is still a lot of Tennesseans. It's nearly 3/4 of the state. But a decline from 85% of people identifying as Christian to 72% making that statement is potentially a big deal in a place where churches have long had a very big effect on the community at large. The more people spend their Sundays in the church pews, the more the messages delivered from the pulpit drive decisions about how people vote and spend their money, or where they choose to live or put their children into school. And the ripple effects are no joke. Now, just like in the era of the Great Awakening, any two people calling themselves Christian could potentially have very different ideas of what that actually means. And so the study included more questions to sort of drill down a little. It asked people how important religion is to their lives. And that shows even more change. Only 51% said faith is very important. That's significantly less than the number calling themselves Christian. And it's a big decline from past surveys, where more than 70% said religion is very important to them. I do tend to think things can be kind of squishy in surveys like these. Who's to say where the line is drawn between very important and somewhat important, that kind of thing. Are the results from one year to another really apples to apples, right? So factoring in the other end of the possible answers helps to kind of smooth out those details and see how likely it is that the trend is real. And this time, it sure seems like it is. Because the number of Tennesseans saying religion really is not important to them grew at a similar rate to the decline in people who really value it. Also, the numbers of people saying they attend weekly services lines up very well with the religion is very important results. In other words, that's also on the decline. The survey finds that the number of people who pray regularly or attend prayer groups is down. People are reading scripture less frequently. Fewer people believe in hell. The study also threw in some new questions this time, getting to some of the thinking that could impact people's opinions on policy matters around the environment and energy. 76% of Tennesseans said they believe God gave humans a duty to protect and care for the earth. But almost as many, 68%, said they have a God-given right to use the earth, including plants and animals, for human benefit. In just a few minutes, a David Lynch retrospective at the Bell Court. That's coming up after the newscast.
We know that local government isn't the only part of your life.
Like the mayor, I know that city government isn't the only thing you're concerned with.
We are still struggling to find affordable housing.
Particularly with this bus stop.
That's one of the unique challenges with my business.
I'm WPLN's Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams. I'm working to break down topics like transit, housing, and local government to make sure that when you are thinking about Metro, you're getting the full story. Follow my latest stories at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Tennessee's Army National Guard has sent helicopter support to fight wildfires in the Mountain City area of East Tennessee. The Guard says its Black Hawk helicopters are using so-called Bambi buckets to drop hundreds of gallons of water. The helicopters can also deliver supplies. The state's wildfire interactive map shows a 30-acre fire burning at the border with North Carolina. Forecasters are worried about the spread of wildfires as strong winds blow across the state. WBIR reports there are burn bans in place in multiple counties and a ban on campfires in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Tennessee plans to resume executions this spring. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us the Department of Correction has released a censored version of its protocol. It leaves out where they're sourcing the lethal drugs.
The Supreme Court set Oscar Franklin Smith's execution date for May 22nd. It's the first of 4 scheduled for this year, following a moratorium. The state systematically mismanaged its lethal injection drugs and had to come up with a new system. Officials plan to use only one drug now, pentobarbital.
Because of the secrecy, I don't know what the source of the pentobarbital is.
That's Kelly Henry, a federal public defender who has spent decades working with death row clients. Tennessee is one of several states that shields the identity of pretty much everyone involved in executions. Supporters say this protects pharmacists and drug makers from harassment, but critics note the secrecy makes the complicated process even murkier. 4 major drug makers sell pentobarbital, but none will for executions. So states basically have 2 routes. First, compounding pharmacies. These are small labs that make copies of well-known drugs, usually for simple reasons, like when a patient is allergic to just one ingredient. Compounders are much less regulated than big drug makers and carry more safety risks. Henry says that's a big deal for lethal injection drugs, which can separate.
Then it's like putting rocks through the veins.
The other route is the gray market, using drugs that were made in legitimate plants but don't have a legal prescription.
You don't know if somebody decides to cut it so that they can divert portions of the drug for their own personal use or to sell. There's no control over whether those drugs are kept in the conditions that they're supposed to be kept in to keep them stable and to keep them effective.
Some lawmakers attempted to get rid of these secrecy policies in 2023, but the bills failed early in the process. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
A bill working its way through the Tennessee legislature would allow school districts to refuse to enroll students who are undocumented. Lawmakers say it's a deliberate attempt to overturn a 1982 Supreme Court decision that ruled children have a right to attend school regardless of immigration status. WPLN's Chart Aston heard from activists who are banding together to fight this plan.
A coalition made up of Turk, the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, the ACLU, and the education equity group EdTrust Tennessee says this is part of a broader struggle throughout U.S. history, the fight to give all children equal access to education.
Whether it was denying African slaves and their children the ability to learn to read and write, segregation of public schools, or fights over funding and resources in schools that are predominantly Black and brown, public education embodies where we can see equity and justice come into real life.
That's Lisa Sherman Luna, director of Turk. In a webinar Monday with advocates and teachers, Luna and her allies said they're holding phone banks this week, calling state legislators who they think are on the fence about voting for this bill. If it passes, then their goal will be convincing school districts to continue enrolling undocumented students. If districts start denying students, the coalition says it's ready to sue Tennessee. Char Daston, WPLN News.
A grand jury has indicted 2 people in connection with a jet ski crash that killed a Boy Scout on Old Hickory Lake last summer. The incident happened during an event at Boxwell Reservation, a Boy Scout campground. Both watercrafts were operated by staff members with juvenile passengers on board. The child who died was 10 years old. The staffers are charged with vehicular homicide through reckless action. They're also charged with safe speed, risk of collision, and head-on situation violations. The criminal case is separate from the $10 million wrongful death lawsuit that the child's parents filed in September. That suit accuses the Scouting Group's Middle Tennessee Council of negligence and reckless conduct. Nashville's Department of Transportation has announced the latest streets to receive new traffic calming measures. The 25 streets, which span the county, were selected from a pool of over 600 potential locales. They will get renovations that can lower vehicle speeds, things like speed cushions and traffic circles at intersections. This is the latest round of the city's street traffic calming program, which works to make streets safer for pedestrians. Roads are evaluated on factors like car speeds, number of pedestrian deaths, and the vicinity to schools, parks, and libraries. Before the changes are implemented, neighbors and council members will meet to vote on the design approach for each street. Applications for the next round also opened this week. Neighborhoods will have until March 18th to submit online applications at nashville.gov. That's the sound of the opening procession of Jazz Mass at West End United Methodist Church last night. The historic worship space in Midtown hosts the annual New Orleans-style celebration to kick off the more solemn Lenten season. While the UMC and other spots across town partied for Mardi Gras, less than 12 hours later, many of those same Christians from observing denominations are now getting their ashes. The black crosses on folks' foreheads today symbolize humans' mortality. Priests and pastors often remind wearers as they streak the ashes on them, quote, "For dust you are, and to dust you shall return," taken from the book of Genesis in the Bible. Lent continues for the next 40 days, not including Sundays. You can hear more about Lenten practices in a 2024 episode of This is Nashville, dedicated to the observance. Find it online now at WPLN.org or tune in to hear it again on the radio Thursday at noon. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Well, we've done it, y'all. We've made it to the midpoint of another week. That means it's time to start thinking about what to do in our free time. And Marquise is on it, as always.
I'm Marquise Munson here with another edition of Nashville Public Radio's What Where Wednesday, keeping you up to date with the happenings in Nashville this week. Live music opportunities range from 2 WNXP present shows with Howdy at the Basement East and Paris Paloma at Brooklyn Bowl tonight. At the Blue Room tomorrow, WNXP's Nashville Artist of the Month, Annie DeRusso's hosting her album release, and Gary Clark Jr. begins 2 nights at the Ryman. Wrap up your week Tuesday with Wunderbar's Grimey's in-store performance. And for more events, head over to WNXP.org/events. This week for What Where Wednesdays, David Lynch, a retrospective, is happening at the Belcourt Theater throughout the month of March.
My name is Toby Leonard, and I'm the Director of Programming at the Belcourt Theater in Nashville, Tennessee. And we are mounting this David Lynch retrospective in March. Specifically, it's March 7th through 19th, just as a celebration of the man and his incredible impact on filmmaking and in culture and television and music and art. I don't know if there's a beta to David Lynch, but I think of like Prince, the loss of Prince or somebody like that. It's a pretty monumental loss in the world of cinema. I mean, we're losing people all the time, and all of our greats in many, many fields. We would be remiss not to honor the man in some shape or fashion.
In heaven, everything is fine. In heaven,
subjective point of view, I would just say that the mood, the vibe that's cast upon the casual viewer, perhaps going in not knowing what they're going into and leaving perhaps not even sure if they arrive to any sort of conclusion whatsoever in the ensuing 2 or so hours. I think of Twin Peaks, the television show. Many people have attempted to reach into the morass and pull out some morsel of meaning or what, but I just think it's just the work of a consummate artist who is always wanting to keep his audience on their toes and constantly second guessing, subjectively speaking. My favorite David Lynch film is Mulholland Drive.
Oh, baby, I know every little star, just how sweet I think you are. Why haven't I told you that?
Get Jason over here. Cindy, Adam wants to see Jason.
That one provides the broadest puzzle with the most pieces and the most recurring themes that you see in his work. And, I spoke of the befuddlement and the beauty. That's a film that I can, people talk about, coming across a film on TV and not being able to turn away. That's one of those movies for me that I can just never quite grasp fully enough. This is just a real great opportunity to revisit everything. I know I'll be there, probably taking in a few that I haven't seen in a long time as well. And the whole thing is basically, we got 9 feature films. We got 6 of the early short films. We have 2 seminars and 2 documentaries about him. And then we also have The Wizard of Oz, which is this thing that some argue is a constant point of reference in his work. It could certainly be seen in a lot of his films. And in fact, one of the documentaries we're showing is called Lynch Oz, and it's basically a 90-minute, clip-heavy exploration into why The Wizard of Oz is the most important film in the world for David Lynch. So we have 2 seminars, one on the first weekend and one on the second. The first one is actually a seminar with the actress Alicia Witt, who plays Aaliyah Atreides in David Lynch's version of Dune. She also would go on to be in Twin Peaks as well and has done a whole bunch of work in cinema and television. A lot of people would know her from last summer's big mega horror hit, Longlegs. So she actually lives in town. She's a member of the Belcourt. She's graciously volunteered her time to come down and just talk about her experience working with David Lynch, and very much looking forward to that. We also have a second seminar with Jason Shawn, who's the Nashville senior film critic, and he'll be doing a deep dive into some of the murkier and more, shall we say, heady corners of the Lynch universe. This is a log of work that welcomes, subjective takes. And I would be more than curious to hear what any first-time Lynch viewer would take away from it.
For more information about David Lynch, a retrospective, and other events happening this week, visit WNXP.org. My name is Marquise Munson, and thank you for listening to another edition of What Were Wednesdays.
Thanks for listening to the Nashvillager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.